gonna start this thing up anyway. So
All right. Because you just wanted to talk about things being in my mouth.
I do want to talk about things being in your mouth or near your mouth or
Yes.
in and near your mouth. Either one. It's been a long week already. So
Yes, it has. Lots of stuff have happened this week.
apparently so. So let me know then when you're set there, sir.
I am good.
Well, we knew that, but let me know when you're ready to talk about stuff. Sorry,
Stuff.
stuff and things and stuff.
HR Puffin stuff.
HR puffin stuff. Yes, we'd like to talk to you about the sexual harassment with the dinosaur that you have and that weird freaky guy with the big head. What the hell?
Show me on this puppet where he touched you.
HR puffin stuff. Welcome to the spoiler room, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very small crew of two tonight in the spoiler room, and we're here today to talk about a very interesting film, and it's called The Circle. And we'll get into it a little bit. First off, the person joining me tonight to actually talk about this very interesting film is none other than the Bowtie Man himself, Mr. Paul Salzer. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well too this fine evening that we're recording this. And yes, folks, as I mentioned, we are talking about the film that came out just this past weekend called The Circle. Now, The Circle, for those of you who may not know, has a description of a woman who lands a dream job at a powerful tech company called The Circle, hence the name, only to uncover a nefarious agenda that will affect the lives of her friends, her family, and even all of humanity. Now, Paul, you got a chance to see The Circle, and let's start like we usually do with these. What is your initial feeling with this film?
I loved the theme. I loved the characters. I didn't quite like the execution of the film, and I really did think that it was paced like a novel and not like a movie. And once I got by all that stuff, I did enjoy watching the film. It just wasn't as thrilling of film as I would have expected. I was expecting that thrill ride that I was getting from The Net, but I didn't. I didn't get that same feel from The Circle, even though it was a decent film. And I do love like I said, the themes and the characters.
And for me, I dug so much of this film, and I don't know if it's just it clicked with me or what, but it's an odd film. It's a peculiar film. You're right. I'm glad you put it that way because I was trying to kind of put my finger on how this film was actually done, and it was being done more like a book than it was a film, and so there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more subtlety in this film, and I'm hoping I'm not reading, making a whole bunch of stuff out of nothing. But I think on the surface, if you look at The Circle, I can understand the criticism. But I think if you look just beneath the surface, there's a lot of things that are actually being addressed here. And in all honesty, I think some people are not liking the film because it makes them uncomfortable because there's things in here, a number of things that you could see very easily happening, and they're already the wheels are in motion for stuff like that. Wouldn't you say? And do you think that maybe part of the problem some people have with the film is, and I'm not saying it's a perfect film by any means, but part of it might be because it's a little bit too close to home?
Very close to home. I mean, there are so many aspects of it that I saw in myself, and it made me kind of question, where do I stand in this whole idea of allowing myself the convenience of life, but losing out on the privacy of it. And I on Facebook on Facebook, there was one of my Facebook friends that said that they had the like a experimental fit band thing, that they were part of a long-term experiment, and it was getting close to being done, and it was like, oh my god, that's The Circle.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in here that hit really close to home, and I honestly think this is people. You know, some of it is like they've got their eyes rolling, but at the next minute they're checking on their phone. You know what I mean? I mean, there's plenty of things, and I first off, Emma Watson, she plays May, the female character who kind of gets wrapped up in the circle and what its actual intentions are. And I really dug her character, but I think if you don't take this film, it's classified as a thriller, but for me, when I got done with this, I looked at it going, wow, this is actually a biting satire on our current culture and where we would be going if we keep, you know, if certain ideas were explored to the fullest. Would you say that maybe this is actually not so much a thriller, but more biting satire at the way social media is and how people view it?
Yes, it at its core, this film is a warning to tell people this is what life could be like. And I don't know when you did right after the film, how many people did you watch immediately turn on their phones right after the movie was done and hopped on? Because I know I did right away because I posted something about the film. You know, oh this film has
Mhm.
was this and I think there was only like 4 or 5 people in the theater because I caught the
Sure.
morning show, and all of them got out their phones right away and were typing away, and I was like, ah, we didn't get the message. Oh no.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and all a number of the things, and we'll get into it here with the circle and what they do, are things that are occurring now, yeah, they might be a little exaggerated in here, but I think if this was approached more at looking at it, making not so much, you know, kind of making fun of and being the warning rather than looking for that, you know, a sci-fi thriller angle, I think it would be differently received. In all honesty, I think this was kind of marketed wrong. In all honesty, the
Oh
way the
yeah,
trailers and were, because this film isn't what I expected at all going into it.
I would agree. I would definitely agree with you on that.
You know, I'm not sure what angle they're playing at. This cast is great, though. I mean, I love the May character because she starts out kind of the, you know, innocent, everyday, you know, person who's looking for the better job. She's got a difficult life at home because she's, you know, her dad has was it MS?
Yes.
You know, played beautiful. It was bittersweet seeing Bill
Oh,
Paxton on screen because he gave such a gave a great performance, but it was also a heartbreaking performance as May's dad who has MS. How'd you feel about seeing Bill Paxton? Was it a little bit bittersweet for you?
it was, and it made me, and just to see him not as the Bill Paxton character that I'm used to seeing him as, but to see him as this kind of a frail, weak character, actually made it a lot harder for me even because it was like, oh no.
it
But it was so emotional. It was great, but emotional.
it was great, and was it Glenn Headley plays May's mom, and I just loved her parents. They felt that this family unit felt good. I mean, it's great when you get experienced actors together like that because they all it felt like a family. It really did, you know, and them dealing with the way Bill Paxton played that character was fantastic. I mean, he's not on screen long, but which makes what happens in this film later on even more kind of shocking because you feel so bad for her parents later on in this film because of something that happens, because these are like the sweetest parents you could have.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you know, and so she gets into the circle through her friend Annie, who's played by Karen Gillian in uh, probably uh, one of the first roles she's had on the big screen where she didn't have to hide her Scottish accent.
Yes. Woo-hoo.
I had a little chuckle with that going, Oh, well, at least in this one, she doesn't have she doesn't have to hide her Scottish accent at all. So I'm sure that was a relief for her. But it was great seeing her on screen as well. And this campus, what did you think of let's dive into this environment now that May gets thrown into the circle. Were you getting an Apple Google City vibe at all with this?
Yes. And that was the appeal to me, because that's a place that I really do want to work in, because I do work in IT. I think you work in IT too, don't you?
I do. I do work in IT as my day job, yes.
See? And that's it, it was like, wow, I wish my work day was like this. And it was like, oh, and especially since part of the job was to maintain your social media presence. And I'm like, that's what everybody does at work anyways. Perfect job, right?
Oh, it was a great parallel, and yeah, especially when she first starts, because her job, the job that she gets, is helping people through social media, basically helping their customers. Because the Circle is this tech company that does a lot of great technologies. They've got a little bit of a subplot in here about a technology that was kind of stolen, that was borrowed from an individual who worked there, and I forgot what they called it exactly, but it was a unifying, like, brought a lot of your profiles together under one profile. It was
Like
kind of
TrueU or something like that, right?
it was what?
Like TrueU or something like
Yeah,
that.
like TrueU, I believe it was called, is their
Yeah.
initial, what kind of built their empire on,
Yeah.
which was kind of a Facebook on steroids,
Yes.
in which connected everything into your profile. But they wanted to take it further with that, because they have these tech meetings that we get to see through May when she's first working there, where they talk about their next innovation. And Paul, what'd you think of their philosophy that they started, that we get to see in May's first basically meeting with the little cameras?
Oh, you mean the whole they're introduced as a guppy, and they try to encourage all the people. I actually thought that was like, wow, Tom Hanks really reminds me of Steve Jobs.
He played a better Steve Jobs than Ashton Kutcher, I think.
Oh yes, yes.
His character, it was more Steve Jobs than what we've seen on screen, I think, before, in all honesty. I mean, no offense to those who have played it before, but it definitely modeled after Steve Jobs. And the technology that came out with the little camera eyes, isn't that a little eerie as well?
Yes, it's like what do you call it? They have those type of cameras now, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not as small, and people just love them. I can't remember what they are now.
What, the GoPros
The
or?
GoPros, thank
Yeah.
you. And I have a friend that I used to work with that got a GoPro, and he just loves it, and it was like, oh my god, again, another thing of my life being shown here. And and then when the whole thing, the scariest thing about that whole presentation was he popped up a picture and said, basically, they could put one camera in this one section, but then they revealed that there were actually like 14 cameras in that entire street. That people, they just basically gave out these little cameras, and people just stuck them everywhere that they could. And it was like, and then later on, it was fun watching. It was almost kind of a game where in the movie you like look for those little eye cameras everywhere.
Yeah, because they subtly put them everywhere. You start seeing them everywhere. They
Bathroom stalls.
but they don't really bring full focus on it. Just a little bit, like the bathroom stall scene. Yeah, where May has kind of is moving up on the ladder very quickly, and her friend Annie is kind of worried about that, and they go into a bathroom, and she tosses the camera, going, pervs, because there's a little camera in the women's bathroom. But yeah, the presentation with the cameras, the fact, what was scary about it was they were showing a technology that was already developed and implemented before they even presented it
Oh
publicly.
yeah, yes.
You know,
Yes.
and what was scary about that, and what I love is how Tom Hanks's Bailey character, who's the head of, who is part of the head of, he's the main guy, if you will, of the company, but he also has a partner, but he's the main face of it. How he was going into this with good intentions, and I think this is where it lays in some of the problems maybe some people have with the, because you're not quite sure who to root for in
Yes.
this film. Because first it's May. You're like, okay, May, yes, May. And then you meet Tom Hanks's character Bailey, and you're like, oh, especially with the trailers, you get, yeah, he's kind of, maybe he's not on the up and up. But then he starts making a presentation, and I hate to say it, but he gave a pretty convincing talk as far as like the the civil rights implications of being able to see everything all the
Right.
time.
Accountability, transparency. It's all about that, right?
And that was the running theme throughout, but this was about
Yeah.
transparency. I mean, it could, again, hitting close to home here, Paul.
Yes. Well, and then they had that subplot of bringing in the politician and how they kind of used the ability to gain secrets of the politician and gain an advantage. But then they flipped it around and they actually presented a politician that was willing to be totally transparent. And then it was like, at first I was like, oh yeah, see, they proved how bad the technology was. And then after they brought in the politician that was willing to go 100% transparent, and they gave the speeches and the reasons why, and it was like, wow, that makes sense. Why aren't we doing that with our politicians? And they completely turned me around in a circle.
And that's what, that's why I thought the title of this film was fitting, because it pulls you around, because on one end it's presenting two sides of the argument within the film. And if again, if you're, it depends on what you're expecting, that could throw you off, because at that point they're talking about the transparency, and that's where John Boyega's character comes in and shows May what actually they're doing as far as the transparency, and they have a whole server section dedicated to just one senator. And then he's talking about how they plan on doing more, and they have this whole area where they can put more servers. And here May is getting a little nervous, because she's like, oh, that doesn't seem quite right. That seems kind of wrong. At the same time, you're like, well, great, we got transparency for a politician, but at the same time, you're like, but the person has absolutely no privacy and that much information, where they say, was it knowing is good, knowing everything is better. And that's a scary philosophy, especially with the technology that they demonstrate in this film. Paul, what about that philosophy of knowing everything is better? Do you think this film kind of is trying to show both sides of that argument?
They have to, because if they don't, it would be untruthful. Because I think in reality, it is one of those things that has to be good and bad at the same time. You have to find good in it, or it's a very complex theme, and they tackled it really well, only because they were willing to grab both sides of the argument. If they would have just went down the one path, it would have been your normal action thriller, which is, I think, what the marketing department was actually marketing, because that's what they thought this film was. But they didn't see that other side of it, the one that actually truly balances the story.
You're right. Yeah, it is more of a balanced story, and especially with the trailers, and even before going into the film, I'm like, oh, Tom Hanks is playing a bad guy. And then you see Tom Hanks in this film, and you're like, okay,
Steve Jobs.
It's Steve Jobs, and you're just like, is he a bad guy? I mean, he's a corporate guy, so he's in this for the money, and having this technology with all this open knowledge, all this information, is a hell of a lot of power. and you can tell they want that power. But then you also get these arguments where you're like, well, you know, he is right. There is a benefit to it, you know,
And to show that he wasn't truly bad when the tables were turned on him, he just basically said, "We're beeped," you know?
well, you can say it. You can say it here. We're fucked.
Basically, yeah, we're
It's a
fucked. That's what,
PG-13, so they get the one F bomb and they use it perfectly because, which we'll get to a little bit because I think that's what struck me even more so with all that is the May character, because she comes in and at first the audience is in her place, so you get to see this really just amazing, just really untraditional workplace through her eyes. And we get to see how she's constantly rated by the people she helps. And then you get kind of a humorous moment where the greeters, she's been there for a couple weeks, and the greeters show up going, "Oh, we noticed you didn't set up your social network profile yet for the job." And she's like, wait, what?
I need to do that?
Not only were they encouraging her to set up a social account so she could talk to other people within the circle, they knew a good chunk about her life already and were concerned about her, her not attending many of the social functions and promoting them on her social media account. And while it was humorous a little bit, it started to give a little bit of a cult vibe to it. I mean, maybe I watched too many horror movies. What about you, Paul?
Honestly, that is the corporate environment that I am used to imagining. You know, that's how I envision corporate environments to be like. But yes, it is a very slightly very slightly. It is exaggerated, of course. But yeah, it is a little bit scary. It is very cultish because they come to you and they're smiling, you know,
Happy.
overly happy, and that just lures you in, just like a cult would. It's like, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing this, and they focus on trying. There, it's like, you know, if I would have known, you know, oh, you kayak, oh, I kayak too, I could have joined you. Well, like, what? Wow, you just inserted yourself into her life as though it was a normal thing to do.
Yeah, I know. They're like, "Oh, well, we don't have all this information either." "Oh, you do this?" "Yeah." And yeah, that part was creepy, but at the same time, like many things in this film, you could see it happening.
Yes. We do it all the time on Facebook. You join a group and then suddenly it's like you get all these people that are like, "Who are you?"
Mhm.
I posted this thing, and you get all these likes, and you know, and it's like,
Well,
oh.
well, that's the thing too. Within the circle, May learns that your social standing is through your social media account, and you're rated by the things you say and do. And I'm like, holy crap! I'm like, that's going on right now. YouTube people weigh some of the value of what they do by views, by clicks, by likes, by and here it's in a corporate environment where your job and your performance kind of hinges on it. So it's taking it to that
But
next level.
also took that to the level of politics too, where they could topple regimes by basically amassing a bunch of people to send like unsmiley face, you know, frowns at the country, and it's like, oh, I'm going to topple the regime by doing that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they hint at that, and May has a guy who her family really wishes she'd kind of be with. He's known her since childhood, and they have this moment that I was like, wow, they hit the nail on the head where thinks she's going to help her friend out who makes antler chandeliers, really cool antler chandeliers actually. And so she shares a picture of it on her social media account. She's only been there a month or two, and that was it. And people said some people liked it or whatnot. She hadn't seen much reaction, and then you find out the other end of it, don't you, Paul?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. You get a bunch of people that hate. the haters, the flamers that come on there and say, "Oh, you're an animal killer for you had to have killed all these animals to get the antlers, even though you can get antlers without having the animal die."
Right, exactly. And that one hit me. I thought immediately going, okay, here's where you're making a statement about all the Twitter fanatics out there that the minute someone says something even slightly or does something that one person might find, rather than just ignoring it, they've got to comment about it and send death threats.
But and the weird thing is, like, so take it in like the modern world today. Like if I would have sent a tweet out like that, I would probably get that type of reaction from people.
Mhm.
But if I were a celebrity and I posted, "Oh, this looks great. This is neat. See what my friend made?" Everyone would be gushing over the same exact thing, only because I am a celebrity and she wasn't a celebrity at the time when she posted that. It just proves that that's kind of like a reflection of what Twitter society is like now, or could potentially, be
There,
like now.
there's a lot of reflection in this film,
Yes.
which again, on the surface and going into it, I can completely understand many people looking at this going, oh, yeah, this isn't a thriller. Their expectations. Oh, this is what it was supposed to be, and it's not. It's poking fun, and it's a window into our society as it is and where it could easily go if it doesn't get put in check. I mean, you get that scene, and you have it now in today's society where you have the couple fighting, and where she's fighting with the guy who's telling it, Mercer, who tells her that, hey, I'm getting death threats and that, and you see in the background people filming her.
Yes. Oh, yes.
What'd you think about that scene, Paul? With them suddenly, with people, strangers that don't even know her, they just know her from her profile, and I think at this point she had been on stage with Tom Hanks's character. Everybody was filming what they were doing.
I see that all the time now. Again, I have to bring up an example of my own life where one of my friends basically reposted a video of somebody going off on a Uber driver,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole thing was filmed. But it was weird, is if you looked it up, you would see different angles of the same event. So you could tell that there were multiple people filming that one event, and it's really scary. And you'll see fights and stuff like that. And a lot of times too, here's the bad thing about it is, yeah, you're keeping a video record, and maybe you're doing a good service, but why aren't you stopping that fight? Like, somebody
Right.
could be getting pummeled, you know, and you're not trying to stop it. Instead, you're trying to film it for your for extra clicks and extra views, and that's a little bit disturbing. It really is.
It is, and so you get that in this film with the May
Yeah.
character, but then May, who does do kayaking, she's upset by this event, so she does something uncharacteristic, where she breaks the law, sneaks into the place where she normally kayaks. She gets on a kayak and goes out in the middle of the night, which really is not a good idea, especially when you have a huge amount of fog. And she has a life-threatening event.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the film kind of takes this really interesting turn that I really loved, but I could see many people hating with her character. After she has this event, she finds out that the reason the cops were able to save her with the helicopter and that were because these little cameras that the Circle puts out were everywhere already in the area.
Yep.
It caught her doing a bad thing.
Some guy watching seals. They wanted to watch seals. Happened to see her go by one of the cameras. It was just amazing.
Right. And you're like sitting there going, because you're getting the perspective of this film from May. You never leave May. So you don't know what's fully going on outside the real world. You don't get to see like extra cutaway or montage of people putting cameras everywhere. You stay with May, which I thought was interesting because it made you realize, just as May was out of touch with what was going on in the real world due to this innovation and how fast it was going, you're with her when that happens, because that surprised me that there were cameras like that out already when they were just presenting it at the Circle. But technology, well, you mentioned it, Paul. Technology does turn around fairly quick, you would say,
Yeah.
as far as implementing, wouldn't you?
Yes, always. And especially like with the Apple stuff, every so many like months or not months, but every so many years, it's like you have to get the new iPhone and the new iPad. It's like it's almost mandatory, right?
Right. And so here you have this technology that they had just presented at the beginning of the film, and she's at the job a month, and you find out these little cameras are everywhere already. And it's like, wow, and May didn't even realize where all the cameras were. And so after that moment, Tom Hanks's Bailey character looks at making her an example. And Paul, what does she agree to do? And like I said, this is really the odd turn it takes, and I loved it. What does she agree to do because of her breaking the law and being caught by being?
She realizes that secrets are lies and lies are bad, so she has to go 100% transparent and basically film every moment of her life. She only gets like a 3-minute window to use the bathroom, and that's it.
How'd you feel about that?
Well, honestly, I like when I started out blogging, I had a pseudonym called, basically a pen name, and I took on the persona of what was called the Forsaken Ferret, which I still use to this day. And that layer of anonymity was needed for me because when I was starting out, I was afraid that people would find out who I was, and I couldn't write everything the way that I wrote it because I was always afraid. And I think as I got older and as technology changed, like this was like 10 years ago, now it seems like everybody is more and more transparent. So it's almost accepted that who cares if you're making a mistake or making a fool out of yourself? That's good. You should do that. That's encouraged. So I'm finding myself using my real name on a lot of projects now. And I only keep the very, very embarrassing things with my fake names. So
well, now we know the fake name, Paul. So
well, we know one of the fake names.
You just were transparent, Paul. Way to go. There you go. Way to be brave, just like May.
Should I turn on my webcam too?
No, I don't want to see what you're not wearing. But
just a bow tie. Just a bow tie.
Wow. Thanks for that image. That's gonna stick for a while. But speaking of uncomfortable images, May soon learns that maybe being transparent isn't what it's cracked up to be. But at first, she loves it because what happens to her with this once she chooses to be transparent? What happens to her on campus?
Her
Paul.
Popularity just skyrockets because people like that. It was like you're doing this wonderful, fabulous thing, and deep down they want to capitalize on that too. They want to be part of her thing, be part of her circle, and because of that openness that she has and that willingness to be out there, her popularity just goes through the stratosphere, and it's just amazing. It's just to see that in real life because you can really see that. You see people basically putting themselves out there, and for the most part, if an average person that doesn't get that push from some marketing guru type of thing, no Tom Hanks, no Steve Jobs, you don't get that stratosphere boost. You just get that layer of nobody knows who you are. Even if you post the same exact stuff, you can be online 24/7 and still not be as popular as May got. But because May had that huge presentation in front of the audience, in front of the company, had essentially, and I'm sure every single product that the Circle did, the TrueView and all that stuff, all that stuff would have pushed her, saying, the little pop-ups that you hate in Facebook, the ads, it would have been, have you seen May Holland
Yeah.
Do this.
Yeah.
Do you want to see more of May Holland's parents? Check in tonight.
which, which leads you to showing the other dangers of being completely transparent. And I mean, at first she, and especially from, and you can see it from May coming from this kind of dead end customer service job where she's explaining why people, their check was short because they got dyslexic and switched to 3 and a 1, to now within 6 months of that job, she is now the number one person at the job. She walks in, everybody says hi, May. And would you say she gets a bit drunk on popularity?
Yes, and I don't blame her because
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I would be exactly the same.
But I think she plays it a little bit subtler than you may want from this role. In that, you don't see the huge change in her. It's more of a subtle change. At least I thought, that she was really getting into this popularity, and it wasn't so much like her emotional performance, but how what the things she say changes over the course of this film. Would you say that change in how she feels is more coming from what she says than, say, possibly what she's showing either emotionally or on her face?
Yes, and that's surprising because Emma Watson usually does a very good job of emoting with her face,
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it is mostly through her words, and I think maybe that's a byproduct of the novel,
Mm-hmm.
where all of the emotions have to come out kind of in the dialogue. Um, so yeah, maybe that is the case. But I also think that character-wise, that did make sense too, because uh, I don't think she was a little bit drunk on the popularity, but I don't think she could get too wrapped up with it. Otherwise, then you would realize that she was being a fake, that
Right.
she really wanted the popularity, which wasn't her. She truly, honestly believed that that lies were bad, secrets are bad, and that she had to present herself to everyone all the time to spread the word and get them excited about the idea of they can do it too eventually, which woo,
It's
scary.
that hive mind thought.
Yes.
She's like became kind of the queen bee in the hive, but at
Hmm.
the same time, like you said, you really, and I think that's the scary part of this film, and the part that maybe some people are missing is in that subtlety is how she is completely converted from the beginning of this film to the end of the film. She legitimately, even with the stuff that happens, especially when she embarrassingly, because her parents decide to go transparent because the circle decides to help her parents out, and it's really doing a good job and helping her dad with the MS, and it's such a positive thing. They go transparent so that they can get the benefits,
Hmm.
and then she runs across of them being a bit intimate, and so of course that's she's got like 2 million, even more than that, people watching her constantly. And so 2 million some odd people end up catching her parents accidentally on camera just for a moment being very intimate. And she feels bad about that. She does. And the family decides not to cut. But even during that, you notice, Paul, did you get the idea? She felt bad. And I loved how they popped up all the comments too. I know I'm drifting here, but when they did that, especially where they show all the different comments people make about it, and there's a variety of them from troll comments to everything, and she
Yes.
reads those, even though when she confronts her parents, you get the feeling like she's going, "It's not that big of a deal, Dad and Mom." Did you get that feeling as well, where even though she was sincere and she felt bad and she knew they were embarrassed and she knew it hurt them, on another hand though, did you get the feeling like she's wondering, let's get past it, it's done now?
But that would definitely come from a mentality of the current generation. People always complain that millennials have this like short term type of attention where things things that happened in the past. Let's move on because there's more exciting things that people will forget about, and that's true with our current news cycle now. Is
Mhm.
that all the scandal that we heard about like a month ago? I've forgotten about, truly, because nobody talks about it anymore. And I think she was in that mentality too, where especially if you're 100% transparent, there's gonna be a lot of things that will pop up that people will gravitate toward, you know. So
Yeah, yeah, I would say that, especially, there were some things where I'm thinking, going, "Wow, that's gonna get creepy for her at times," though she
yeah,
did turn it off when she went to sleep,
yes.
which was a good thing, because
Well,
that
people would have just saw darkness. That would have been just like,
yeah.
oh, okay.
Which again, you do have some of those cams that are out there, not for people necessarily, but areas or whatnot where it's just completely dark and you could log in and see it, and you're like, okay, nothing's happening right now, but they have the cam on 24/7. But this transparency that she has, uh, the Bailey thinks, Tom Hanks's character thinks he can exploit this, and they do for a while. And she, I don't think, even realizes she's quite being exploited, because she's very, very true to her cause of being transparent. But then you get that scene where you've got the art sculpture, and we suddenly learn what's her major, Paul.
Yeah, so it had to do with art, didn't it? Like,
Yeah, she
yeah.
was an art major, and you're like, what? Wow, you know.
That's
Um,
something that wasn't on her social media account. If we had that access, we would have known that, right?
we would have, and it was interesting seeing that, and I liked how the director did that throughout the film. As she's on the circle, you get to see more and more of the messages that people are leaving on her live feed as you see it come through. And I thought that was interesting because they had a whole wide variety of messages, especially with the embarrassing thing with their parents. Many people sympathizing, some
Yeah.
people being cruel. How do you think they handled that with showing the messages? Do you think that kind of added a bit to the feeling of people watching?
Yes, I think it was a wonderful tool. It was probably one of the execution things that I did enjoy.
Mhm.
They do in this film, and it also allowed you to see different sides, and you can also kind of gauge certain tones in the film too, because even after certain things happened, she was still getting messages about things that were happening or that happened to her. Like she
Mhm.
would be gone for a few days, and everyone would still be comforting her about things that. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing. But reading those things, it's like, oh, the people care, and then you get people that are like, uh, I really do want to get this on Blu-ray and pause it to and then translate some of the foreign things, because I'm
Oh yeah.
sure that some of the stuff that was written in the foreign languages were
Mhm.
probably really interesting.
So you have me throughout this, and you have Bailey, Tom Hanks' character, kind of exploiting her with this whole transparency thing, and she's slowly brainwashed into thinking, "Hey, this is a great idea," which she does make some strong arguments for. So they decide to take it yet to another level. Now that they got all these little cameras and everything, and collecting information on senators, transparency, and Mays just being the golden child. What technology did they come up with next, Paul?
Well, to cure voter registration, and since everybody is currently using their thing, why don't we force everybody to basically register through the service that they're the true whatever
True
Facebook.
you, I think it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true you. And by having that account, because they already go through the background checks already, so why not do that? It makes sense, right? That you authenticate who you are, you have everything that you proves that you are, and you can't hack obviously somebody's Facebook account. So of course, why not allow voting to be done through the actual uh, the app or the technology, and make sure that instantly you can have people vote. It's true democracy, you
Yeah,
know?
they talked about how it was true democracy and the argument they made. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, what's bad though is a part of me was going, you know, I hate to say it, but not the force part. But well, they didn't use the word force though either. It was the way they presented it. It was like, well, since we do this already, we'll just automatically register them to vote.
Yeah.
And on the surface, it's like, wow. And yeah, this was the part where May is really moving up, not only in their social standing, but with her standing with Bailey, because she comes up with this idea, and her friend Annie
Integrating, yeah.
is disintegrating because they're just doing the corporate. She's become a corporate workhorse, and they're just running her ragged. Yet May is getting kind of the cushy job. And here she comes up with this idea of, yeah, let's just register everyone to vote. That's a good idea. And on one hand, you kind of go, well, you're right. You've got all the social media and background checks. And that's where we found out about the Circle too. They don't just, it's not just a Facebook sign up, is it, Paul?
No, they do background checks. They make sure that you are who you are. And oddly enough, I remember when Google Plus first came out, they required you to kind of have some layer of truthfulness of who you are. You couldn't use fake names. You had to be the real person. And it was just like, oh, come on. I wanted to use Forsaken Ferret.
Well, Facebook had that too, though.
Yeah.
A lot of people got flack for using a fake name. Even though they had your real name, when you were on your public profile, it got they for a while, and that got shut down because a lot of people complained. But for a while, you really had that where you couldn't. Your regular name was just displayed on Facebook, whether or not you liked it or not. But May comes up with this idea of the voting thing, and at first you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That would encourage people. If people didn't need to leave their computer, if they could just log into their account and go, oh, look, it's voting day in my district, go to their district, click, 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 boom. You're like, that's great. Yeah. But especially you and I working in tech, you get that, but
exactly.
Not only would the Circle have collected information of how everybody voted, it could be hacked, it could be stolen, it could be sold. Once they had that information, Paul, you could do anything with it.
Oh, yeah. And they would redraw district lines based on how you voted. And so they would always have the same politicians being elected in the same districts every time.
Well, it would really put the Circle in such power. I mean, and that's one of the scary things, and where this is kind of becoming not so much a thriller, but a horror movie, in that you see this company, and with these ideas, if they could convince enough politicians, they could get a power like this.
And they, in the film, they even said they had like 15 countries already like on board.
Right.
Like, wow. Holy crap.
Right. And so and it's blowing your mind with this scene, because May wholeheartedly, she's not saying this because she thinks it's going to get her in good with the boss. This is where Emma Watson shines, I think, actually, because you feel like she truly believes this is the right thing, only seeing the rose-colored, beautiful flowers. This is going to be absolutely awesome. Not seeing any bad.
I was actually ready to drink that Kool-Aid too. I was like, yes, I want this, but I can't speak out loud because the other 4 people in this theater are going to think I'm insane and probably take pictures of me on Facebook because of it.
Right, and then they're going to post, this insane guy was in the movie theater. They get 1,000 likes, it'll go viral, and then the movie makers from the Circle may be contacting you. So there's a win there. There is a win there.
I'll go 100% transparent.
You go 100%. I don't want to see 100% transparent. No offense, Paul. You're a great guy. Love you, man. But
you will realize just how boring I really am.
We really don't need to know, in all honesty. But
I was an early adopter of the webcam long time ago, and I did try. I set it up in my computer room, and that was it. I just pointed. I got more likes by pointing it outside, looking at squirrels, than I did actually with me on the computer. Because all I would sit there is it would be a picture of me typing away, and I think the only time I actually got a spike in the view that other than the squirrels was when I was brushing my teeth. And then that scene where she's brushing her teeth and these things were popping up and they were talking about her brushing her teeth.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, my God, this is me. Wow. Maybe I have these cameras actually in the house already.
So we're getting to the end of the film here. May seems to become the poster child, but then she does, when her friend gives her a bit of a reality check, she does kind of come back a little bit and pushes the Kool-Aid away a little bit and meets up once again with John Boyega's character, who's been sitting around in the background. Ty, he's the guy that came up with the True You stuff, and he kind of suddenly she realizes Bailey has some nefarious plans for the information, which is kind of, I almost got a Frankenstein's monster vibe from this. Am I off on that, Paul?
No, you're exactly right. That is great feeling, man. Oh.
Because she's talking to Ty, played by John Boyega, and John, he thinks, awesome, we're going to stick it to the man. Because she's like, oh, we've got this information. We've got to come up with something. And he's like, yes, we do. And so of course, they do this off camera. We don't see it. It's in between, scenes like a week later or whatever, that they've set up something that they're going to stick it to Bailey.
And the other guy, the Patton Oswalt character.
Yeah, Patton Oswalt's character. They're going to stick it to him. And so this is a point in the film where you start thinking, oh, okay, so maybe she's waking up to the bad, having so much knowledge isn't exactly a good thing. Yes, civil rights implications and all these good things, but there's also the other side of the sword that makes you bleed. And you're thinking, okay, she's about to take him down. So we get to this presentation where they're doing this find. That was before this. I'm sorry. Before we get to the final part, we get to the part where, and that's what woke her up. It wasn't just her friend Annie. I apologize. It wasn't just her friend Annie disintegrating, but it was the new program that Bailey came out with that is to find anyone on the planet.
Soul Search or something.
Soul Search. Yeah.
Yes.
And so they decide to test it by giving it a 2-hour block of finding a convicted felon.
Which is cool. I'm drinking that Kool-Aid too.
I was going to ask you, Paul, what'd you think of that?
I loved it. I was like, yes, that was actually very cool. And it was like, and that could happen. That could easily, because you're turning everybody into a police officer at that point, even though they don't have the training or any of the good stuff that police officers have to go through. But yes, but you basically have like a monitor, essentially. You look at London, it's covered with cameras. Well, you just basically made the entire world a camera.
They actually succeed in finding them.
Unless the person was,
right. And so John Boyega's character is one who went off the grid. And so after they find the convict at this big presentation, this big, Steve Jobs type presentation, someone throws out, well, who should we find next? And one of them recommends him, Ty character, and she actually does protect him.
Yes. Which I was surprised.
Which surprised me, but there too, I think it's because you can't quite gauge where her character is, and you're not supposed to, I don't think. I honestly think that is by design. You can't quite gauge where her character is. I think that's turned some audiences off. Would you say that?
Yeah, it does make sense. I didn't view that in that way, but yes, I can see where other people would feel that way because of that. Because they have to have that, they have to have that all-knowing type of.
Well, you've got to have the good guy. You've got to have someone to root for. And so at this point, you're looking at Soul Search and you see, okay, they did great. And then they decide to look for Ty, and she actually protects him. And you're like, oh, well, maybe she isn't completely brainwashed yet, and she's not turning this guy in, so maybe she's all right. And then they decide to look up her possible, the guy from her childhood, Mercer, who's kind of gone off the grid, and they find him, and well, there's an accident.
Yeah, they hound him. They chase him down like he is an animal. Oh,
Which I got the parallel making a statement about paparazzi.
yes.
That was that again is the film paralleling real life situations in this film to a very scary degree, because you're looking at this and you kind of think this is kind of ridiculous at first, but then you're like, no, if you told people and you've gotten these people into it that were full transparency, convinced through the May character, this is a good thing, you'd say, hey, help us find this person. You're going to have thousands of people at least in the area trying to find the guy and then chase him down.
It was like a game to them. It wasn't anything, there wasn't a really neat, whereas like finding the convicted killer or that convicted thing, that escaped, that gives you a go. But to find just some random guy, it felt like they went overboard. They were like, it was just like, oh, I want to be the first. I want to be the first.
And then at the same time, you could see that in real life.
Yes.
We have seen that in real life, to the same unfortunate tragic consequences in many cases, where there's an accident and somebody gets hurt or dies because they've been chased, trying to get away from paparazzi, trying to get away from rabid fans chasing them down. You get that. And so you have that in here. And that's what wakes up May a little bit. And again, that's the point where they turn around, and then May works to catch up now where I was trying to go for before I kind of jumped ahead. That's where she works with Ty, and they decide to they decide to stick it to Bailey, to the heads of the circle. And what do they do with that, Paul?
He basically hacks all of their emails, including the secret accounts and the secret accounts that not even the ones that their wives know about. And that was kind of hinting at interesting. Okay. And so essentially, not only did you make the two target characters 100% transparent like May was trying to be, but you also made them even more transparent because their entire back history was revealed as well. It was wow. Right. It was like, oh yeah.
And you felt good at that point.
Yes.
With this. You're like, awesome. Okay, this is the part where we stick it to the man, where they stick it to it. And that's where Tom Hanks gets that one line, we're fucked, like we mentioned earlier. And you're like, and he's just smiling because he knows
he's caught.
They're staring at May, and at first you think May's doing this to get back at Bailey and them for her man dying.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of implied that you're like, okay, she's getting the revenge. We're sticking it to him. We're gonna fade to black, and we're gonna watch him shuttering the circle.
Nope.
But no, because here is where I got that Frankenstein's monster feeling that I mentioned before. May has grown so popular, she's more popular than the guys they just burned. Not only did she burn them, she goes, we need this transparency with everybody, and suddenly everybody's drinking more Kool-Aid. Are they not?
Woo, yes, they're drinking it by the gallons full.
Because, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and honestly, they didn't show any of the bad side to that either. It's just like, ooh, they've created a utopian society. Again, I'm going to drink that Kool-Aid now too.
And again, if you looked at it from a straight standpoint film, you're like, what the hell? But if you look at it from a satirical standpoint, it makes such a statement. I think it's such poking fun going, here is a person you've made so popular, they've outgrown the company that made them popular, and whatever they say, people will do.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the scariest part about this whole thing. May became such a viral hit because she was such a viral hit with the company that the company employees didn't care. She just exposed their two CEOs' entire secrets, which would have probably could have had major financial consequences for the circle.
Yes.
And they're happy about it.
Yes. And all of those, and that there's secrets that all of us keep, that we would not want to expose, but she just, that now that they've opened that door, any of your past secrets could have, but they're accepting of that. It was all, yeah, that's good. That's really
because
good.
of the popularity May had developed.
Yes.
And she, like I said, became a queen bee, if you will. The hive bought into her more than Bailey. And she ends with a smile on her face going, we all need to be transparent. And everybody's, yeah. And then you get kind of a little epilogue in here where she's on her kayak being followed by 4 drones and she's smiling.
Yep.
And you fade to black. And you're sitting there in the theater going, what? Oh my God.
Yes.
But in a good way for me. But
because it was it was not a bad thing. The 100% transparency is still good. And the problem is the people that aren't willing to go the whole way.
Well, because it only works, and that's, I think, kind of the feeling too. It only really works if everybody buys into it and is transparent. Then
how are you going to do that?
Might work, but you can't do that because of human nature. And so when this film ends, you're not sure how to feel about May. And that's what I loved about it, but I understand that's what many people hate about it. Is because who's really the clear-cut hero and villain in this movie, Paul?
I honestly, there wasn't one. I honestly wanted to root for Tom Hanks for a little while. Then I went back to May, and then there was a part of me that wanted her friend, Karen Gillan. Yeah. I wanted her character to be the hero to me, but then she disintegrated on me, and I'm like, oh. And that was one of the things I didn't like about the characters was I felt that the characters were so interesting that I wanted to know more about that circle. I wanted a complete circle of their stories, and I realized that in the center of it all had to be May, like you were saying, and that's where the focus was. And that's the unfortunate thing. It's like, oh, I wish I could have followed a different camera. Come on. We could have followed those guys. It would have been an interesting, and maybe they will in the future someday have a movie where you can pick the path of the character that you want to follow. That would be awesome.
I wouldn't doubt it. They've already played with it a number of ways online, not maybe in a theater setting, but definitely online, a choose your way type of film. But it'd be a big budget one would be interesting. And that you could see them doing that with a film like this. But so the main problem you had with it was the characters?
No, the execution, the pacing of the film. I loved the characters, and that the choice that they made to stay focused on May, I understand was a choice that they wanted to make, and that was probably a good choice. It made me feel, it left me with that gut, like, kind of feel.
Like you were missing out.
Yes. And that's what happened to me was just, and that, whenever you have a little bit of inkling of distaste, it builds and builds and builds. And then you start picking at the film with different things. And that's why ultimately, the film is a great film, but it could have been a much better film in my mind. But then it would also not be the same film. It would not be the film that was presented, and it probably would have had a far less impact. It would have just been a more entertaining film.
Right. This film isn't, and that's the thing, it was marketed, but this film isn't a straight up thriller meant for entertainment.
Exactly.
And I think it's because of the people involved in it. That's why it got wide released, rather than staying, say, in the festival circuit forever. Because you could definitely see this as being one of those where it makes the round South by Southwest, Sundance, Tip, one of those, and then it kind of goes direct to video with maybe a limited theatrical release.
Mhm.
But it got a wide release, which surprised me. It just showed up, I was like, wow, I hadn't even seen much promotion for it.
Mhm.
But it is a different film. You're right. The pacing is a bit off. I will say it's not a perfect film by any means. I really enjoyed it, but I can see where people wouldn't like it. It's not a perfect film, but it's not a horrible film either. I think this is a film, and I saw someone write about it, and I have to agree with them that I think this is a film that will be watched years later,
Oh,
and I think it'll get appreciated more.
because they'll see how much of that reality came true.
Right? I
Oh.
I kind of honestly think that it's a film that while on the surface and everything, you take it just as it is, you're like, yeah, okay, but there's a lot of philosophy and a lot of things and a lot of ideas presented and explored in here that, well, like we are here having a discussion about that, open your mind and make you think about these things, because I don't think there was a single thing presented in here, in all honesty, that I couldn't, that I said to myself, I couldn't see them doing that.
Yes.
Would you say that there's probably, I mean, maybe a little bit in the design and the cameras and that, but even those, would you say that probably not a piece of technology or thing that demonstrate in here that you couldn't actually see happening?
Very true. The only thing that I probably would have griped about from a mathematical standpoint was
Mm-hmm.
the fact that she had 100% approval rating after having something less than that. Because if it was an average, there's no way she could ever get 100%. Mathematically, it's just not possible. But I guess they drop off after a certain amount of time because she was there a month, right?
Well, she was there for a few months.
A few months, yeah. So
Yeah, and well, they probably do drop off after. I would
it's
imagine,
the
just like
only way, right?
that'd be the only way, is because well, from a business standpoint, you wouldn't want to keep those stats forever,
Right, because
because someone could go back 2 years ago. Well, you guys say you're the best in town, but here 2 years ago you had 5 employees below 85%.
yeah.
Whereas if
Oh,
they drop it off after you know
yeah.
36 months or whatnot, well, look at our rating.
Yeah.
So you could see that, but uh, again,
Yeah.
I fully acknowledge this is not a perfect film. There's
Yeah.
some choices and things that they could have did differently. On the other hand, though, it's just my very humble opinion, for whatever the hell that's worth. I don't think this film deserves as much hate as it's
Oh,
getting.
no, definitely not. That the hate is misplaced, I think. Yes.
But again, I think part of it is because it hits too close to home.
Mm.
And people, we may not even, I will even say it, parts of it made me feel uncomfortable, because I was like I said in my review, I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I do that. Oh yeah. Yeah, I do that too. Oh yeah. you know? And I'm wondering if there maybe just is a little bit too much reality in it that
yeah,
would turn people off. Would you say that might turn many people off, especially who your demographic is probably going to be for this film?
yes. Otherwise, I mean, if you're not, then maybe then you would be like accepting of it, and then that would make you a bad person.
Right.
So yeah.
You're not sure where to sit with this film. And that's why I dig it, because here's a film that got wide release that you look at it going, this is not a traditional film. I mean, on the surface, maybe, well, yeah, you got to, point A and point B, but the way things are presented is not exactly by your numbers way, if you look just below of what it's trying to say, I think.
It, it,
Go
Do
ahead.
you I was just going to add that this film is the type of film that a lot of like the critics like us and that we've constantly saying, well, let's come up with something original, and let's do
Right?
something a little bit different. And this is something a little bit different.
Right. And then you wonder why they don't do something a little bit different, because if it is different, it makes people uncomfortable. Give them a different experience than you're normally used to when sitting in a theater and watching a film. It's going to either be a huge hit, but more so than not, it's going to be a flop because people expectations. And again, too, I fully chalk it up to partly the marketing on this. I don't know what the marketers who put together the trailers and that thought what type of film this was, but this is not a The Net, thriller. This is not like one of those. I forgot. There's another movie came out a while back that was computer related that.
Oh yes.
I forgot the name of it. Oh, but it was in kind of in a similar vein, but it was more of a straight up thriller, and this one isn't. It is handled like a book, which doesn't always translate well to film, but I give total props to this film for what it's trying to say and what it's actually presenting, because it's trying to be a modern, relevant film. And I think it succeeds in that. But that, again, that's, my thoughts on it. I think people will appreciate this film, or this is definitely a film I could see being played in a college classroom for, say, social media managers or tech folks. How about you? Would you say that this film is a good college fodder film?
Yes, and also possibly to cover group dynamics, sociology, psychology of people, the whole need to excel at something. The whole point system was put into place to make people like all excited about. She elevated her work because she needed to get that higher score, and that in itself could be a class.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and she got social points for sharing, and how much she talked on social networks, she got points. And the minute you apply points to anything, it's going to cause competition.
Exactly. Oh, and so you could just, like you said, this could be a college course. Maybe even take it down to the high school. This would be This would be a good course. This has so many meaty things to teach.
And maybe it's too much to put into one film as well. That might get to a lot of audience, folks. There's just maybe too many things to where, like you said, you're missing out. Maybe I want to follow another camera.
Yes.
Each one of the things that they face in here, you could see them even expanding on. But I think this is put together more to be a conversational piece, a conversational starter, more so than just to present a beginning, middle, end type of story. And I think that adds to that odd pacing, is because you have passage of time moves through. We there's chunks of time we don't see.
Yes.
Which can throw some people off as well. And it's done to me in the past too, where you're sitting there going, wait, how far ahead are we now?
Yes.
And so the timeline does get a little muddled with this. But for me, I guess final thoughts, we'll wrap it up here. This is a film that I really enjoyed. I can see its flaws. I can see how people don't like it, but I dug it because it's another film that's being socially relevant, that's bringing to light current day topics and current day things, and presenting things that could actually happen. And we don't, I think, get as many films like that, especially with sci-fi, that we used to get. Because like in the 80s, that was a thing. Holocaust, nuclear war, war. I mean, these things are going to happen. But also other things in the culture. And I don't think we get quite as many films nowadays that do that. We didn't even get that many back then, but I think there's a few more than today. But I think The Circle will get more appreciation down the road than maybe it's getting now. And though it may not have high ratings or a high box office, I think this is a film that people will still talk about years down the road. That's my final thought. What about you, Paul?
I really agree with that. It is going to be a discussable film and something that people will be talking about in the future, so long as people are willing to bring it back into the view of people.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like they were hinting at, if it's out of the minds of the people, it's going to be out of the minds of the people. They're just going to
Right.
forget about it. So it's important that we bring up movies like this every now and then, and it's important to have things like documented on YouTube or and the spoiler room, so that people can go back and say, remember that movie from a few years ago? And yeah, and I think they're going to, especially if they decide to remake the idea of it. and
Mm-hmm.
and I was suckered in by the media or the marketing. I
Mm-hmm.
did what I was expecting, another The Net type
Right.
of film. And when I didn't get that, it was just weird. But then you you get past that. Don't If you watch this film for the really the wonderful ideas and the discussions that they want to bring up, that is where the movie shines in that
Mm-hmm.
aspect. The characters are wonderful. It's just the pacing that drew it down a little bit for me, but it is definitely a film that I want to watch again. So,
Right, because there's stuff in there you missed.
mhm.
You
Oh
know,
yes, oh
there's
yes.
there's stuff in here that you missed, and yeah. So there you have it, folks. Two people here who actually did not hate this film, and I know we're in the minority, and that's okay. But I honestly think that maybe when it comes out for rental, I suggest people possibly revisit it and don't approach it like a straight thriller, because you will get disappointed. And again, that's fault of the marketing. I think going into this, if I looked at it as a straight up thriller, I too would be like, oh man, that was freaking boring. But it's not really. I mean, there is a little bit thriller part, but this is not the story of the innocent girl who learns how evil the corporation is and decides to take it down. This is showing many aspects of our current culture and where it could easily go if things don't get put into check and if we don't ask questions. And this film is made to ask questions and not necessarily give you answers, but have you work out answers with other folks who have seen the film. So go into it looking at it more of a satirical film, as a social commentary film, more so than a thriller. And I think you'll be less disappointed and you'll see more of what's underneath the surface of the circle. So we'll wrap it up here tonight. Paul, why don't you go ahead and tell them where they can find you at when you're not here?
Well, you can learn more about me at forsakenfilmreviews.com now, because I have it registered.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Yep.
Woohoo.
You can also check out the Film Jerks, as well as the Forsaken Film Review podcast on astroradioz.com. And also, there is a wonderful film festival that's coming out in October. You can learn more about that at newhorrorfest.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for sitting down and talking with me. I needed to talk to someone about this film. So I appreciate it. I'm glad we did, and I hope I wasn't gushing too much. And if I do, I apologize. And here's a towel. And we'll just say now, thanks so much for listening, folks. SpecialMarkProductions.com for all your Movie Man needs and all the Spoiler Room archive and everything there. We just posted 2 interviews with 2 folks involved in indie film. I have Henrik, who did Amityville, No Escape. He's a very prolific indie film director, has made a lot of films of various genres. Had a great conversation with him on found footage films and that. And we also had the privilege of talking to Bill Oberst Jr., Emmy Award-winning actor who is very prevalent in indie films. He does a lot. He's one of the hardest working guys I've seen, does stage, does all kinds of things, and had a very interesting interview with him as well. So check those out. Thank you so much for listening to us babble about this, and hopefully we maybe sparked some idea of a different approach you might have for the circle. And until next time, we'll say good night, gentlemen.
Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, gentlemen.